Chair now recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a very important hearing we're having today, and I'd like to take a little time to respond to some misinformation that has been spread here. Mr. Snyder, you said in your opening statement that the fact that there are neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian military is disinformation, a disinformation trope, and a Russian denazification meme. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record this 2021 Time magazine article titled "How a White Supremacist Militia Uses Facebook to Radicalize and Train New Members" about the Ukrainian neo-Nazi Azov Battalion.
Without objections ordered.
Thank you. Time also put together a piece only 3 years ago, and it's quite an extensive video that gives full information about the Nazis in Ukraine and their recruitment efforts that go all around the world. It's amazing to me that just in a few years' time, it's now considered misinformation to talk about the Nazis in Ukraine. I'd like to quote the article. It says that Ali Sufan, a security consultant and former FBI agent who has studied Azov Nazis, estimates that more than 17,000 foreign fighters have come to Ukraine over the past 6 years from 50 countries. According to Christopher Wray, the FBI director, he said that Azov has been recruiting and radicalizing and training American citizens for years. He also finished saying in his testimony to the U.S. Senate that American white supremacists are actually traveling overseas to train. This is an extremely concerning situation. I don't think anyone in the United States government, Americans, do not support actual Nazis or white supremacists. I know I certainly do not. And I can't understand why in just a short amount of time, this information that our own American media frequently talked about is no longer talked about. I'd like to point out also, here's an NBC article stating that Ukraine's Nazi problem is real. Mr. Snyder, do you see this headline? This is NBC News. They say that Ukraine's Nazi problem is real, even if Putin's denazification claim is not. So even our own American media, unless you consider NBC or Time Magazine misinformation spreaders or disinformation media outlets, this is contrary to what you testified. And there's frequent pictures all over. Anybody can find them of Nazis. Here they are. This looks like something you'd see out of Hitler's Germany from Ukraine. And this is something that's extremely important to talk about. According to the Council of Europe, however, Ukraine is ranked well in the top half of countries in terms of how corrupt they are. In the last 5 years, Ukraine is ranked close to the countries like Gambia, Iran, Myanmar, and Sierra Leone in corruption. That's not very free and democratic company to keep. Ukraine has canceled their elections, arrested members of the press, not allowed different types of religion unless it goes along with the Ukrainian government. And right now, the biggest push in Washington, D.C. is to fund the Ukraine war with another $60 billion. And while we're talking about the CCP, I think it's extremely important to point out that our own wide open border is the most dangerous threat to our national security. According to CBP data, there have been 24,296 Chinese nationals enter the United States at the southern border just this year in 2024. I want you to know that's up 7,000% since Biden took office in 2021, when only 342 Chinese nationals crossed our border. When we're talking about national security and talking about threats through the United States, Congress needs to remember that our open border is the greatest threat to the American people who, by the way, Monday was tax day, April 15th, when struggling Americans pulled together to pay their taxes or filed for extensions or paid money that they just didn't have and desperately are hoping for a tax return. The United States federal government is doing everything they can here in Congress, persuading members of Congress with every lobbyist from foreign countries and groups trying to tell us to send $100 billion overseas, and we're doing nothing for our border. So when you want to talk about misinformation, Mr. Snyder, you might actually look a little closer to American media if you don't like what they're saying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, does he have the opportunity to respond to the gentlelady?
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't ask him a question,
No, her
Mr.
time's
Raskin.
expired.
You asked multiple questions.
I did not
Mr.
ask him a question.
You certainly did. You said, did you see this?
Time
Raskin.
has expired. Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair.
Yeah, that's a declaration, not an observation, but that statement still stands. By the way, let me also... No, that's a declaration, not an observation. We'll have to have the conversation before the House caucus. But first things first, we still have to get the national security bills over the finish line. In that statement, that's what we made clear, that we have to do the business of the American people. We've been waiting for months, unnecessarily, because of gamesmanship and partisanship and brinksmanship on the other side of the aisle. First, the extreme MAGA Republicans said, we can't meet the national security needs of the American people until we make changes to border policy. And then the extreme MAGA Republicans killed a border policy bipartisan piece of legislation. Then we were told that the extreme MAGA Republicans could not address the national security needs of the American people until a spending bill was completed. Democrats provided the support necessary to make sure that we funded the government in a manner that was compassionate and comprehensive and met the needs of the American people. And then we went on to another excuse from the extreme MAGA Republicans. Third, we were told that the national security needs of the American people could not be met until we reauthorized the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Even though we were promised, after finishing the spending bill, that the first order of priority upon our return to Washington in April would be national security legislation. But we had to deal with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which Democrats once again helped get over the finish line. Extreme MAGA Republicans, as we have observed, are out of excuses, and the American people and our allies in Ukraine and throughout the world are out of time in terms of our national security needs being met. Hopefully we're on track for that to happen tomorrow. We've been very honest in our assessment of the situation from the very beginning, including in the declaration that I made in late February. And at the appropriate time, as House Democrats, we will have a conversation about how to deal with any hypothetical motion to vacate, which at this point hasn't been noticed. Moscow, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massey, and Gosar are quite a group, and I'm sure that will play some role in our conversation. But central to the conversation, the prerequisite to the conversation, is to make sure that the national security legislation in totality is passed by the House of Representatives.